So our learning objectives for this module are to define public goods and discuss what it means to be non-rival and non-excludable. We're going to talk about the market failure of why efficient quantities of public goods are not supplied. And then we're going to talk about the role of government in providing public goods. Okay. For a good to be considered a public good, it must be both excludable and rival and non-rival, non-excludable and non-rival in consumption. This is how we characterize a private good. A private good or service is excludable and rival in consumption. What's the number one way that we can be excluded from consuming a good or a service? How can we be excluded from consuming a good or a service?
If I'm not like old enough.
If you're not old enough? How else can we be excluded? Okay.
Height.
Well, sometimes if
Roller
you're trying to
coasters.
get on a ride at the Kings Island.
They price it at a price point where you're not willing
Yeah.
to pay for it.
The number one way that a good is excludable is when it has a price associated with it. Any price, okay? Any price can keep, because basically if you don't pay, you don't go out of the store with the item, right? Rival in consumption means the same unit cannot be consumed by more than one person at one time, right? So like, if you get a cafe cookie, nobody else can eat that cafe cookie. They can buy one exactly the same for the same price, but it's still rival in consumption, okay? Now, these are what describe private goods. There are some private goods that are not rival in consumption, and they are growing in number every day. It is software and apps. The line of code, if I download the Adobe Acrobat app, or Adobe Photoshop app, and I have to pay $30 for it or whatever it costs, it's the same line of code that you are going to download to put on your laptop to use Photoshop. Does that make sense? So there are some private goods. So if it's both, it's definitely private. But even if it's either, it could be considered private under different circumstances. So there's a little bit of nuance there, okay? So for public goods, they must be both non-excludable and non-rival, okay? So I will give you some examples of public goods, however, that are excludable. And we'll talk about why they're excludable in just a second. But non-rival means that more people, rival and non-excludable. There are ways that public goods can be both. And this is the perfect definition. So the best definition of a public good is one that is both non-excludable and non-rival. I can't stop you. Nobody can stop you from consuming it. And more than one person, and actually thousands of people, consume it at the same time. Like a traffic light, or a street light, or a traffic signal, right? So I don't live in Blue Ash, but Blue Ash can't stop me from seeing the stop signs and the stoplights in Blue Ash, right? And the fact that I see the red stop sign doesn't mean that because I'm looking at it, you can't look at it. Does that make sense? Okay. Now there are some examples of public goods that are both excludable and rival. For example, our national parks. You have to pay a small fee if you want to camp there. Okay, so you can't just go willy-nilly into Yellowstone National Park and just camp. You have to buy a permit. Well, you can, but you're going to get caught by a ranger, and then you're going to pay a fee. They're going to kick you out, and you can't ever go back to the national parks ever again. It's a pretty big deal. Don't do it. Okay. Non-rival, the best example of this is libraries. There's only so many copies of a particular book, which means that if someone else has checked out the book, you can't check it out until they bring it back. Like you can place a hold on it, but you can't, and they even do this with ebooks. So even that's downloaded code, there's a limit on how many licenses for that code that the library gets at any one time. Does this all make sense to you guys? Okay. So there are some things that are considered public goods that are both excludable and rival. So there's some nuance in there, but if you ever see it on the exam, right? Or on a test question, you want to go with the best, the best example, okay? So here are some things that, so for example, a private good that's artificially scarce is streaming music and computer software. So they're not rival, but they're scarce because you still have to pay for it. And then non-excludable and non-rival, these are the best examples of a public good, but these have some sort of rival in consumption. Yeah.
Why are bathroom fixtures rival?
If I go to Home Depot and buy a bathroom fixture, you can't buy that bathroom fixture. You can buy another one just like it, but it's not the same one.
Okay, so it means like after.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
No, we stuck with them.
All right. Non-excludable goods suffer from what's called the free rider problem. Okay, you guys all experienced Lily being a free rider on your decision to donate all your money to the doubling account, okay? That's okay. You guys free ride all the time. You don't pay income taxes, but you still get to experience national defense and lots of other types of federal services, etc., that you haven't paid taxes on, okay? But it also can lead to people having some different kind of funky ideas about public goods and entitlement, etc., okay? So when the benefits from a group project are non-excludable, there's a temptation to free ride on the efforts of others. How many times has this happened to you? You're in a group project, it's a group grade, and you're doing all the work. And the people who aren't working as hard as you on it are free riding off of your hard work. So you can think about it that way, as a sort of relatable example.
I was doing work.
Okay. So common public goods include disease prevention, national defense, scientific research. Okay. In terms of trying to figure out for the government how much of a public good should we provide, the answer is to produce where the marginal social cost is equal to the marginal social benefit. And we figured this out by adding the marginal private benefit to the external benefit. Okay. So this is the marginal private benefit curve for two individuals. This is street cleaning as the example. And we've got Tiana and Asher's sort of private benefit from that. We put them together, that gives us the social benefit curve, marginal social benefit curve. We have a marginal social cost curve that is constant, okay? It's a perfectly elastic line at $6 because it costs $6 for every time they clean that one street, okay? So it's a constant marginal cost. And you'll see most of the examples have constant marginal costs. And the efficient quantity for this town that includes only 2 individuals is at around 5 street cleanings per week, or per month, excuse me. That's the efficient quantity. Does this, I don't really feel like I need to go through all these explanations because they make sense, right? Yeah. The marginal social benefit of going from 5 to 6 cleanings is only $2, so they're not going to do that. Okay. This is just a public service announcement for voting. Okay, guys, when we complain about how our tax dollars are being used, if you're not voting, I kind of frankly think, like, keep your opinion to yourself. If you want to participate and have an opinion, please make sure that you vote and vote according to the policies that the person provides, not the person's charisma or anything else. You know what I mean? Like, do a deep dive, find out how they feel about these things, and try to vote that aligns with your values and what you think is an efficient way to spend our money. Okay. Another problem that we have is something called the tragedy of the commons. Sometimes we have goods that are non-rival, and these are common resources. They also can be non-excludable, but they're not good. They get overused. The best example of the tragedy of the commons, of abusing a common resource, is overfishing. If there's high prices for cod in the North Atlantic, or king crab in the Bering Sea, or tuna along the equator, or whatever, there's an incentive for fishing boats to catch more than what is efficient for everyone, because those populations need to be able to reproduce so that they can continue to go on, and we can have tuna and cod and all that stuff into the future. Which is why when there's overuse, the marginal social cost is so much higher than the private marginal cost, the marginal private cost of doing, like buying the fishing boat and going out and doing that. So the socially optimal quantity is much less than the market quantity. Just so that you guys know, most of the time when there's a common resource that is experiencing the tragedy of the commons, and it's something like fishing, the government will impose a quota, right? And you have to buy a license in order to fish it. So what they would do is create the quota here where the socially optimal quantity is, right? All right. Hey guys, we are pretty much done. I want you to work on 1, 2, and 3 in the workbook, okay? So tomorrow I'd like to go over numbers 1, 2, and 3 in the workbook, so write that down. Please tell Yuri, please tell Gwenny. If you guys have a group, you guys have a group meeting for this class, right? Okay. 1, 2, 3.